I saw her do it. Just a flick of the wrist and a drop from a small, clear vial into my glass of Pinot Noir. Vivian Camden, my mother-in-law, didn't even flinch. "Special vintage," she said, smiling like a woman who never got her hands dirty. "For my favorite son-in-law." She handed it to me as if nothing had happened, her posture perfect, her tone sugar-dipped. I thanked her, matching her tone, and took both glasses off the counter. I didn't say a word. I just walked into the dining room, where her husband Gregory was busy scrolling through property apps, not even pretending to be present. "Red or white tonight?" I asked casually, and before she could protest, I set the tampered glass in front of him. "You're a red guy, right?" He grunted, lifted the glass, and took a long sip. Dinner continued as if no one had tried to drug me. The roast was dry. Gregory boasted about his latest museum expansion deal. Sierra rubbed my leg under the table, always trying to balance the scales between love and family loyalty. Vivian kept glancing at the glass like it might start glowing. 45 minutes later, Gregory was ghost weak and sweating through his linen shirt. His napkin dropped to the floor, his hand trembling. "Bathroom," he muttered and stumbled out. Then the retching started. Violent, unrelenting. It echoed through the high ceilings of their open-concept dining room. Vivian's face drained faster than her husband's color. Her eyes shot to mine across the table, and I didn't blink. I just kept chewing my asparagus slowly, deliberately, while Sierra jumped up to check on her father. That's when Vivian knew. She knew I'd seen her. She knew I hadn't taken the bait. And I knew, without a shred of doubt, that this wasn't just passive aggritude like sabotage anymore. She'd tried to knock me out, to stop me from going to the West Coast indie game showcase the next day. It wasn't just disapproval, it was war. And for once, I wasn't going to play defense. Not anymore. My name is Noah Lark. I'm 34, and I design board games for a living. Not just any games. Deep, narrative-driven titles that blend psychology, storytelling, and strategy. I've spent the last decade building my own label from scratch, launching projects on Kickstarter, showcasing at conventions, collaborating with illustrators around the world. I've got a loyal fan base, strong online sales, and a recent licensing deal in Europe, but none of that matters to the Camdens. To them, I'm the guy who makes Monopoly knockoffs in his pajamas. Gregory, my father-in-law, once introduced me to a donor at a gala as Sierra's husband. He works in, games? Vivian's favorite jab is asking when I'll settle down and get a grown-up job. Like being a creative's just a cute rebellion I haven't outgrown yet. From the moment I met them, it was clear they had someone else in mind for their daughter. Someone with a pedigree, an MBA, a trust fund. They see success in tax brackets and titles, not in fan engagement or design awards. They come from Portland's elite art foundation circle, people who throw black-tie fundraisers for causes they barely understand and look down their noses at anyone who doesn't speak fluent legacy wealth. Sierra, my wife, sees me for who I really am, driven, thoughtful, maybe a little stubborn, but never without purpose. But to her parents, I've always been temporary, a placeholder until she comes to her senses. I used to try. I'd show them my latest reviews, my growing platform, the sold-out pre-signing. I even designed a family trivia game one Christmas just to impress them. They didn't even open the box. Over time, I learned something crucial. You can't earn the respect of people who've already decided you're beneath them. Looking back, the signs were always there. Vivian never outright insulted me. Her attacks were quieter, dressed in silk and served with a smile, like the way she'd accidentally leave me out of family photos, or how she'd always ask Sierra to help in the kitchen the moment I started sharing good news. When one of my games got picked up by a major distributor in Germany, she congratulated me by suggesting I use the extra income to 3.6 of the caption, so I knew I couldn't get out. Finally, go back to school for something stable. Gregory was less subtle. At one dinner, after too much wine, he told me, "No offense, Noah, but your little projects sound like something kids do in their garage." Another time, he offered to mentor me, by which he meant finding me a junior sales position in one of his friends' firms, as if that were some kind of upgrade from running my own company. Then there were the coincidences. The time Vivian changed the date of Sierra's birthday dinner to the same weekend as my product launch, Or when Gregory asked Sierra, in front of everyone, if she'd considered going back to her maiden name for her career. At first, I brushed it all off. I told myself they were just old school, a little controlling, maybe tone-deaf. But as the years went on, it became clear they weren't just trying to mold me into their version of acceptable. They were trying to erase me from the picture altogether. And I had let them. Until now. I was dead on my feet after 4 days at the Indie Game West Coast Showcase. 10 panels, back-to-back, pitch meetings, and no sleep thanks to airport delays. But Sierra insisted we couldn't miss her mother's birthday dinner. Just 2 hours, she promised. So I shaved, buttoned up a clean shirt, and drove us across town to Vivian and Gregory's home, perched high in the West Hills, where the furniture costs more than my car and the wine never runs out. Dinner started off as expected. Gregory ranted about urban development, Vivian flitted between condescending compliments and veiled jabs, and I just kept my mouth shut and focused on surviving the evening. After dessert, Vivian announced she had a special bottle of wine to share, one she'd been saving for the right occasion. She disappeared into the kitchen. I followed to help carry glasses and caught her mid-tipping to clear vial into one of the goblets, her back half turned, movements too rehearsed to be innocent. Her hand froze when she noticed me. Then, like a switch had flipped, she smiled. "From my favorite son-in-law," she cooed, lifting the poisoned glass toward me. I matched her expression. "I'll help you carry these," I said, grabbing both. She hesitated, but nodded. Back in the dining room, I handed Gregory the tainted glass without hesitation. He barely looked up from his phone before taking a generous sip. I took the other glass, raised it toward Vivian in a mock toast, then placed it on the table, untouched. She had no idea her plan was already unraveling. Gregory didn't even make it to the end of Sierra's story about her latest dive trip before he turned pale and began to sweat. He loosened his collar, then stumbled up from the table with a mumbled excuse. "Probably the roast," he said. Moments later, the sound of him vomiting echoed down the hallway, brutal and unrelenting. Vivian's face went sheet white. She clutched her wine glass, eyes darting between the hallway and me. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just calmly reached for my fork and took another bite of the lemon tart she'd made from scratch. Sierra stood, rushing after her father, and the room erupted in a flurry of concerned voices. Vivian remained frozen, her fingers trembling against the crystal stem. Our eyes met, and in that silence, something changed. She knew I'd seen her. She knew I hadn't drunk from the glass, and most importantly, she knew I was no longer playing dumb. I didn't say a word during the cleanup, or while Gregory groaned from the bathroom. I quietly excused myself, slipped into the hallway, and pocketed the untouched wine glass meant for me, wrapping it carefully in a linen napkin. On the drive home, I let Sierra talk. She speculated about shellfish or undercooked lamb. I nodded, murmuring agreement. But inside, something colder than anger settled in. Not panic, not fury. Just a quiet, unwavering resolve. Vivian had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and if she thought I would walk away silently, she didn't know me at all. The next morning, while Sierra left for her ocean lab rotation, I drove straight to Reed College, where my old friend Dr. Reese ran a small but well-informed toxicology lab. I handed him the wine glass, carefully sealed in a Ziploc, and told him it was for personal reasons. He didn't ask more than once. 3 days later, he called. "Noah, there were benzodiazepines in that wine. Nothing fatal, but enough to knock you out for several hours. You'd have missed an entire day, maybe more." I thanked him, hung up, and sat alone in my studio for a long time, staring at a prototype board I was designing about betrayal and bluffing. Life imitates art, apparently. But I wasn't done. I needed to understand why. I started quietly digging. Vivian's name wasn't hard to search in local medical databases. 3 prescriptions for the same class of anti-anxiety medication, all from different doctors. Then came whispers from Sierra's circles. A gala incident where Vivian accused a donor of stealing her brooch. A tense country club brunch where she allegedly locked herself in the powder room, yelling about people plotting against her. None of it ever made the paper. Vivian had too much influence. But the cracks were there, hidden beneath the polish. Then Zara, Ethan's wife, invited me out for coffee. She leaned in, voice low. "You're not imagining it. She's been like this for years. And Gregory? He enables her, helps cover it up. You're not the first person they've tried to erase. But maybe, just maybe, you can be the last. When Vivian asked me, so sweetly, so rehearsed, if I'd be willing to take her new foundation headshots, I smiled and said yes. Of course, I replied, masking the bitterness rising in my chest. Let's make it timeless. I arrived that Saturday afternoon at their glass-walled, art-filled estate, camera bag over one shoulder, a sealed manila envelope tucked under my arm. Vivian answered the door in full makeup and pearls, already posing. Gregory's at a board meeting, she said, ushering me toward the sunroom. Just us artists today. I nodded and set my gear down, then handed her the envelope. Before we begin, I said quietly, you should probably read this. She raised a manicured brow, curiosity turning to tension as she pulled out the papers, the toxicology report, photocopies of her overlapping prescriptions and notes from Dr. Reese. Her hands began to tremble. This is absurd, she whispered. I would never... Don't lie, I cut her off. You and I both know what was in that glass. Her expression hardened. You're not good enough for my daughter. You never were. I let the silence settle before replying. Then explain to me how drugging your son-in-law counts as good parenting. Her mask cracked, and I knew. I finally had the upper hand. Vivian didn't try to deny it for long. Once the envelope lay open between us, her composure evaporated. It wasn't meant to hurt you, she hissed, pacing across the sunroom in her heels. Just delay you. You'd miss that ridiculous game expo. Sierra would start questioning your priorities. That's all. She said it like it was reasonable, like it was strategy, not sabotage. I kept my voice steady. You could have just told her how you felt. Instead, you tried to manipulate her by drugging me. She turned, eyes flashing. Because she won't listen? You've wrapped her in this fantasy, and she doesn't even see what you are. I stepped forward, calm and firm. Here's what happens next. You're going to tell Gregory the truth. Then, you're both going to start treating me like a family. Or at least like a man who won't be pushed out. She laughed, but there was no strength behind it. Sierra would never believe you over us. I shrugged, picked up my bag. She doesn't have to believe me. Just the lab report, the prescriptions, the neighbors you alienated. Are you really willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that? For the first time, she said nothing, and I walked out. Vivian moved fast. That same evening, Sierra came home tense, her smile forced. Mom said you were cold during the photo shoot, she said carefully, like she didn't want to believe it. She said you made her feel unsafe. I bit my tongue. The trap had already been set. Is that what you think? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Over the next 2 weeks, things only got worse. Sierra started spending more time at her parents' place with determined gauges and returning with red eyes. She didn't accuse me of anything, but doubt had already been planted. I could see it in the way she paused before answering me, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked how her day went. I didn't defend myself. Not yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew Vivian. If I pushed too soon, she'd spin it harder, turn herself into the fragile victim and me into the aggressive outsider. I had evidence, but timing mattered. I waited, watched, and let Sierra process things on her own. I worked long hours in my studio, saying little, giving her space, but inside I was collecting every thread of truth I could find. Because the reckoning was coming, and this time I'd bring backup. The package arrived without a return address, just my name scrawled across the front in loopy handwriting. Inside was a plain USB drive and a sticky note that read, "You need to see this, Zara." I plugged it into my laptop, expecting photos or maybe a document. What I found instead turned my blood cold. The footage was from the Camden's home security system taped up and clean. Still taking steady breaths, I stood within the kitchen, carefully pouring something into a wine glass from a vial. The same vial I'd seen, the same glass I'd switched. Then I walked in, took the glasses. Gregory drank. But it didn't stop there. Later clips showed Vivian screaming at Gregory in their living room, livid that he drank from the wrong glass. "You ruined it," she snapped. "It was supposed to be him. This isn't the first time you've messed it up." Gregory fired back, "And this isn't the first time you've done this." I sat back in stunned silence. There was a pattern, a history, a family rot that went far deeper than I imagined. Another clip, dated 2 days later, captured them plotting. Vivian proudly explaining how she'd been planting seeds in Sierra's mind, pushing her to believe our marriage was faltering. I watched the videos 3 times. This wasn't about one bad night. This was a campaign, a long, calculated attempt to erase me. And now I had proof, not just for Sierra, but for anyone who still believed the Camdens were just misunderstood. I needed to be sure this wasn't just about me, so I reached out to Harper, Sierra's old college roommate, the one who'd mysteriously vanished from her life after graduation. She agreed to meet for coffee, and the moment I mentioned Vivian's name, Harper's entire face changed. "She did it to Tomas too," she said quietly. "You know Sierra's ex-fiance?" I froze. I had heard his name once, in passing, but Sierra never talked about him. "Vivian convinced her he was cheating," Harper continued. "She showed Sierra fake emails, photos taken out of context, even hinted that Thomas had been inappropriate with other women. None of it was true." Harper had tried to intervene, but by then Sierra was too deep in doubt. She broke off the engagement and never spoke to Thomas again. And just like that, Harper was gone too, labeled toxic by Vivian, pushed out of Sierra's circle. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't just hostility toward me, it was a system, a strategy. Vivian and Gregory had been controlling Sierra's relationships for years, cutting off anyone who encouraged her independence or questioned their influence. I wasn't the first, I was just the only one who finally fought back, with receipts. I invited Ethan and Zara over for dinner, telling Sierra I wanted a quiet night with family. She didn't question it. After we ate, I connected my laptop to the TV. "There's something you both need to see," I said, heart pounding. The first video rolled. Vivian in the kitchen, slipping something into a wine glass. Then me switching the glasses. Gregory drinking Sierra went. Stiff beside me. I let the silence sit before playing the second clip. Vivian screaming at Gregory, furious he drank the wrong one. "This isn't the first time you've done this," he shouted. And finally, the most damning footage. Vivian calmly telling Gregory she was already planting seeds in Sierra's head, preparing her to believe our marriage was falling apart. Sierra's face was pale, her eyes welled with tears. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. "Because I needed you to see all of it," I replied. "Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your whole life." Ethan looked like he'd been punched. "That's not our parents," he kept muttering, but when Zara touched his arm and quietly said, "They tried to do it to us too," something inside him cracked. That night, Sierra didn't go to her parents' house. Instead, she turned to me and said, "I think it's time we tell them everything. Together." I nodded. "Let's finish this." We weren't just exposing a lie anymore. We were taking back our story. In the weeks that followed, the silence from the Camdens was almost louder than their manipulation ever was. Vivian and Gregory didn't call, didn't show up. Sierra started therapy, so did Ethan. There were no more Sunday dinners, no forced smiles across white linen tablecloths. We finally had space to breathe. One rainy Tuesday morning, as I was pouring coffee, Sierra placed my hand over hers and said, "I'm pregnant." Just like that. No drama, just truth. For the first time in what felt like years, we cried for the right reasons. A week later, Vivian left a voicemail asking to talk. Sierra didn't respond. 2 months passed before a formal invitation arrived, handwritten, elegant, dinner, a fresh start. Sierra wanted to go. "They're still my parents," she said. I agreed, but on our terms. We stayed at a hotel. We drove separately. No alone time with Sierra. No hovering over her like she was 12. To my surprise, the evening was civil. Vivian smiled tightly. Gregory asked questions about my latest designs. After dinner, Gregory pulled me aside into his study, offering me a real opportunity, a junior partner role at his firm. I left the drink he poured untouched and said no. This wasn't about business. It never was. That spring, I opened the doors to my own board game studio in downtown Portland. A sleek, brick-laden space filled with shelves of prototypes, hand-drawn maps, and polished wooden pieces. The grand opening was packed. Local fans, past collaborators, indie press, and friends who'd stood by us through it all. Sierra stood beside me, glowing, one hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. Vivian and Gregory arrived near the end, quieter than I'd ever seen them. Vivian held a gift bag she never handed over. Gregory shook my hand, nodded at the display shelves, and said nothing condescending for the first time in years. They left without giving advice, without reminding Sierra how much they sacrificed. That was their new language, restraint. Weeks later, a large envelope showed up at our door. Gregory's company's annual report, glossy and heavy. My photography featured throughout, portraits of staff, shots of the office, even a close-up of an old chessboard I'd designed for a past project. Tucked inside was a simple note. Hired the best photographer I know. No apology, just respect. And that, in the end, was enough. I hadn't changed them, but they could no longer deny who I was, or who we were, together. And that was victory. In the end, I didn't win by shouting louder or sinking to their level. I won by refusing to play their game at all. I protected what mattered, my wife, our child, and the life we built on our own terms. Vivian and Gregory may never apologize, may never admit what they did, but they no longer get to define us. Success isn't their approval. It's peace. It's freedom. It's Sierra smiling beside me, our daughter sleeping upstairs, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I stood my ground with truth, not vengeance. And that's the kind of legacy worth leaving behind. The story teaches us that real strength doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from clarity, patience, and integrity. Noah didn't fight fire with fire. He chose truth over drama, evidence over emotion, and dignity over revenge. In a world where manipulation often hides behind family ties and polished appearances, he showed that protecting your peace sometimes means walking away from validation and standing firm in who you are. The greatest victory isn't changing toxic people. It's showing them they can't change you. And the most powerful legacy? Building a life rooted in love, honesty, and unwavering self-respect.